Welcome everyone to our webinar. We've got some great things coming your way. We'll be getting started here in just a minute and a half. Welcome everyone to our webinar. We've got some great things coming your way. Let's go ahead and get started. So for those of you who are not familiar with webinars and some of the features, look over at your control panel on the upper right-hand side of your screen. There'll be opportunities to ask questions and make comments during this event. You need to click on the questions bar. Should be a drop-down come down, and you'll be able to enter both questions and comments this way. We'll try to field them and answer as many as we can live during the event, but if you participate in this way, we'll have a record of your question and we'll be able to get back to you after the event. We'll also be able to publish a summary of these comments after the event. Before we get started, I'd like to just take a few minutes and thank some of the people that helped this all come together. First of all, there's Jim Kostler from the Youngstown Business Incubator. He's www.ybi.org. Jim's been a mentor and a friend for quite some time. Jim helps to run one of the largest, most sophisticated additive manufacturing related business incubators in the country. They've got marvelous 3D printing resources located there, and they've got great information on their website. For those of you who know me, I've got a soft spot in my heart for the city of Youngstown. My family immigrated there in the early 1950s from Czechoslovakia, and I'm a proud product of the Youngstown State University, where I received my mechanical engineering degree back when the Earth was still cooling in 1981. Another person that helped to promote the event is Ray Sakis. Ray's a fellow mechanical engineer, dear friend, and Special Forces Vietnam veteran. Ray spent much of his life supporting fellow veterans through his Sky Soldiers Foundation. And also special thanks to Deborah Hoover and the Burton D. Morgan Foundation. Deborah helped guide me to folks that they support who shared notice of this event within their communities. So no matter who you are, in today's environment, everyone's uncertain, anxious, and quite frankly, a little bit afraid. I was inspired recently by a book that was recommended by Dr. Amy Acton, Ohio's Director of Health. In fact, she's probably on TV right now with the governor talking about their daily press briefing. The book's called The Hero with 1,000 Faces by Joseph Campbell, and the book's a result of the author, Joseph Campbell, studying the paths of people who accomplished great, incredible, seemingly impossible things. He distills it all down into the little diagram I've got here for you today. And I wanted to start out with this because it really sets the stage for where we're all headed. In one way or another, we're all heading on a journey from the known to the unknown. We'll be facing challenges and temptations as we head out of this post-pandemic world. We'll be thinking about things like maybe rebuilding a business that's been totally devastated, or creating an entirely new career after the loss of a job. We'll be reinventing ourselves. There'll be people telling us that we're going to fail, it can never be done. We'll be tempted to stop and go back to what we used to think was normal. Whatever it is, you'll need mentors and helpers along the way. You'll need to eventually get to some true transformation point where you could finally see success and get into a place that'll be a new normal for you. So I'm hoping for today that myself and the three gentlemen that are about to introduce themselves can be mentors and helpers for you. And maybe together we can spark a new thought in your head about a new business or a pivot, maybe instill some courage in you to look in another direction, inspire you to get on a different work path for this journey that you're about to go on. So a little bit about myself. For those of you who don't know me, I've started a number of businesses. One very successful business, CEC Combustion Safety. I started it in the upstairs of my house by myself, grew it to over 40 people. We did work in over 30 countries, did over 10 million a year in sales. A subtle thing that you may have picked up is I said I've started a million businesses. I'm sorry, I started a number of businesses, but I only talked about one. They weren't all this successful. So I know about starting and running businesses from the good side and the bad side. I was lucky enough to sell my main business at the right time. I also wrote a best-selling book in the industrial safety world, published by Wiley in 2014. And WorkHub 99, the sponsor of this event, is my newest venture, where I'm trying to help people who want to be in business. Let me next introduce you to my good friend and panelist and mentor, Dr. Eric Woodruff. Eric?
Hey, John, thanks so much. And I'm honored to be here. It's great to be a part of this panel. I think we're going to have a lot of fun today and hopefully get some great insights. As for me, I have spent my whole career in pretty much energy management. I have a PhD in financing energy projects, and I've written about 100 papers, and I've been the president of the Association of Energy Engineers, which is in about 80 to 100 countries, depending on how you count it. But I'm just also very passionate about this. I've also started a few businesses, and I'll say not all of them have been successful. And it's remarkably scary in the same way that this COVID business is scary, and you don't really know what's going on, just as your previous slides had talked about the unknown. And so I think this is a great opportunity today to have some insight from other people who've kind of been on somewhat of a similar journey in their life, because there'll be a lot of people out there who are, scared, and that's okay. And so I'm just here to share with some of the changes we've done in some of our businesses and elaborate on some of that. So thanks for asking me to be here, John. And I think Greg is next up for introductions.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Eric, and thank you, John, for having me participate in this discussion, and look forward to what we're going to be talking about. I am a serial entrepreneur, started my first business my sophomore year at MIT, and have been doing that for the last 45 years of my life. Been in the specialty advertising business, construction, computer software and services and training. Sold that business to a public company. More recently, started a nonprofit called Young Entrepreneur Institute. Our mission is that every child should understand and experience entrepreneurship. We think the entrepreneurial mindset is critical, whether you become an entrepreneur or not. And that's what we're doing today. And I'll be talking today about, for those of you interested in starting a nonprofit, and I know a number of people are, given the situation, they want to give back and help us get through this crisis. I'll be talking about some ideas around starting a nonprofit. And Doug, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Greg and Eric, and thanks, John, for allowing me to be on this panel. I'm really looking forward to offering some insight to people that want to talk about transformation. I work for a company called Publicis Sapient. They're a global PR firm, but we also do consulting work where we help businesses, especially Fortune 100 companies, digitally transform their business to enhance their customer experience and also enhance their abilities internally. And so, with everything that's going on with the COVID-19, I'm pretty much on the front lines helping businesses like Spirit Airlines or L'Oreal or Ralph Lauren or ExxonMobil try to figure out how to maneuver through this crisis, but then also think about what's going to happen in the future, in the near future, when we get through this. I don't like to use the new normal because what we're going through really is not normal. So it's going to transform the way people do business now, and we are really into the thick of it right now as we go along. So I'm looking forward to talking and giving some insight into how some companies are actually transforming and maybe give you some ideas on how you can move forward. So I'll turn it back over to John.
Thank you very much, guys. So before we get started here, I want to review where we're headed in this presentation and how to think about some of the things we're going to say and talk about. So I'm hoping that during this presentation, you have these sudden aha moments where light bulbs go off in your head. And you think to yourself, wow, I can offer that kind of service to my customers. I can change the way I do business. But I wonder, have you also thought about, or here's where you can get more information about that. We know that you can all be resources for everyone else. Or maybe that's already being done at somebody's place you know of, or you've seen it done, or you can tell us about an experience that you've had that can be valuable to everyone. So once again, as you have thoughts, please type them in. And I'm going to kick off the brainstorming session by planting some seeds in your heads. So I want to talk about 5 interesting business ideas or pivots that you might think about coming out of all of this. So the first is to think about expert services and virtualization. So how can you virtualize yourself? What special thing that you do can be sold online without you being face-to-face? So for example, can you do training? Can you help people fix things? There's a service in Europe where the checking of fire extinguishers and emergency lighting is done from someone at the building walking around with their cell phone, FaceTiming each device and talking to an expert on the other end. Can you, for example, talk through the repair of a lawnmower with someone who's handy but not an expert? Can you send them repair parts and even the right tools in a kit that they could check out like a library? The opportunities in this area are only as limited as your creativity. What about specialty cleaning for businesses and homes? There'll be a huge market for specialty cleaning and disinfection services. Most people who have worked in this business have been the lowest paid with lots of turnover and little or no training. But these people are no longer cleaners. Instead, for the most part, they're infection control technicians. In many cases, we'll be entrusting our lives to these people now as we move forward. Everyone now understands that they might be one of the most important links to keeping us safe and healthy. So what about things like documenting cleaning that's being done, or documenting the type of training you're giving this cleaning staff, the tools that they use, their effectiveness? The heating, air conditioning, and plumbing world's going to change a lot. So there'll be a scramble for things like disinfecting the heating and air conditioning systems of businesses and homes where infections have occurred or where there are vulnerable populations. There'll be things like the installation of ultraviolet lighting disinfection systems into air handlers and ductwork, or ionizers or special filters, or adding more outside air. There'll be folks changing out faucets to no-touch faucets, changing out air-blown hand dryers to paper towels, and many more building infrastructure needs to minimize risks. What about disinfection equipment, product development, and sales? So everyone everywhere will need hand sanitizer dispensers. They'll need them on a personal basis as well in cars, purses, pockets. There'll need to be special bags for waste trash is not going to be trash anymore. In some cases, from things like public restrooms or air filters that get changed out, or in a daycare that has sick kids, trash is now going to be infectious waste. And there's OSHA guidelines and hospital medical industry guidelines for handling it. There's special bags, special segregation, special procedures for handling it. Has to be disposed of in a very careful way, and people need to be trained. There'll be quite the market for people who know about how to deal with infectious waste. And last but not least, there'll be enhanced delivery and task services. No-touch delivery is in. Wrapping individual products or shrink wrapping things is in. As is maybe the creative bundling of services and tasks, like picking up someone's car, getting it a wash, an oil change, filling it with gas, and disinfecting it in the driveway before turning it over. This might be worth a lot to some folks that are vulnerable and at risk. It saves them a lot of contacts that they never had to make. Any questions or comments?
Hey, John, this is Eric. I've been monitoring the question bar, but maybe I'm not seeing the whole story, but I thought I'd ask you a question just to maybe kick it off. You're a gentleman with a lot of experience, and if you were like 30 years younger and had a much greater time frame left in your career, what of those 5 things would you be most excited about really digging in and making the investment to dig in your personal time to try to develop a business in a sector? Just I just respect your opinion so much. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
I appreciate that. In fact, I've already been digging into something because my entire business, CEC Combustion Safety, was built around creating checklists to make it easy for people to be safe and minimize risk when it came to industrial combustion and boilers. And I had a whole process for that, and I think that can be applied to minimizing risk for infectious diseases. So frankly, I've been spending the last couple of days looking into what it takes to become a master of public health. I'd like to further my education in that area so I've got some credibility and really know what I'm doing when I put together some tools like that for the general public and different industries. So those are the kinds of things I'm thinking about. Appreciate the question, Eric. So Eric, tell us a little bit about Andrea's practice, where you guys are headed, and what kinds of things you've been doing.
Absolutely. So I told you kind of half the story. So I've got my career, and then I married a lady who's 8 years younger than me. And when I got my PhD, she was just starting med school. So she went on to do med school, went on to do radiology specialty, and then after that, breast fellowship trained. So she's probably as good as you can get in breast mammography, et cetera. And we live in a small town. So we built a business here. There was an underserved market. We essentially stole all the patients from the hospital that were getting maybe not as good a care as we could offer. We provided a spa-like environment with the first private clinic in the state to have 3D mammography. So we were a real differentiator on several fronts, and technology and who's reading your mammogram as far as experience and also in the experience of the patient. But, hey, this COVID thing really hit us hard because we have a business where there's a fair amount of face time. You're getting an exam at, there's unchanging, people are disrobing to, putting on terry cloth robes to walk into their breast exam. And so I own the building, she owns the business. We work together, and I wanted to share with you some of the things we had to change to be more COVID resistant. And so all of this stuff that you see on the screen here is really Andrea's work because it's mostly about process. We've basically, as part of our, I'd say Kentucky's been more progressive as far as governors saying businesses shut down. So we shut down 2 weeks in March, and we are now shut. We opened for a few days last week to handle some critical patients, but then we're shutting down for 2 more weeks. And what we did there is early March, we started rescheduling all the non-critical patients. We started just saying, hey, you just got to, don't come in here unless you have to come in here, and really, saying that to our patients. Then when we do have patients that are going to be coming in, our receptionists call them, confirmation call. We ask them if they've got a fever, kind of standard stuff that the CDC has advised us to do. One thing I thought was innovative, we were doing this before the guidelines were out, was we're asking patients to stay in their cars because we have a very nice lobby and a separate area where women are waiting called the Ladies Lounge. And they can, read magazines, be very comfortable. They have coffee. We have a famous cupcake thing. People come in, they have a cupcake. They're eating on china. They're relaxed, and it's kind of a stressful exam is no longer stressful. Well, as I say, COVID changed all that. Now we only let 2 to 3 people in the patient in the clinic at all. It used to be 20 plus patients in there. We make them stay in the cars. When they come up to the door and it's their turn, we have a staff do a non-contact temperature screening at the door. If they're over 99, they cannot come in. And after April 20th, I'll tell you what we're doing is we're saying, bring your own mask. You can't come into our clinic unless you have your own mask. So that's a big push to push on your patients. Like, we'd like to service you, but you need to come prepared. So we're saying that kind of thing. We've cleaned up all the magazines, coffee cups. There are no cupcakes. There's no touchables. Doors have been left open with trash cans right next to them in case someone touches it. We sanitize and throw it right in the trash can. So a lot of really big changes, and increased sterilization after each patient. And there was one more thing I would just say, I think we already covered it, but basically that, we're really trying to minimize the contact experience and minimize all that. And so those are some things in the bullets there that are there. And John, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. Sorry, I held you up. I like that you're fast. It's good. No. So another thing is, when these patients finish, we've been doing this for a couple of years so they can get the results on an online portal. That helps us. That's helped us for a couple of years because we don't have to have receptionists on the phone dialing out, telling people results when other patients are trying to dial in. So, literally that's a staff optimization that was in place already. So, but, for this COVID thing, it could help a lot of people by, reducing the amount of, phones ringing, et cetera. So online portals, how they get the results, and the doctors get that. There's, very little contact, even via communication via phone. And some of the things we did while we were shut down in March is we put UV lights in our ductworks to clean the air as best as we could. It's not perfect, but it will clean some viruses and molds out of the airstream to reduce the risk of redistribution in other parts of the building. And we had to adjust the flow rates of the programs to make sure they're flowing, because right now it's spring and the weather's great and maybe the air conditioner's not working all the time, but the fan is working so many minutes every hour to make sure that is being cleaned. We put in mold resistant paints. Everyone, as I didn't mention this before, but all our staff wears gloves and masks all the time while in the clinic. But one thing we predicted, which we haven't had a problem with, but just from staff, if you've got people and everyone in town, I can't buy gloves anywhere in town. We now keep our gloves, wipes, cleaners, other things you cannot buy. We keep that under lock and key because just to minimize the risk of, someone seeing a nice box of gloves and walking out the door with it. So we've published all this stuff with our local doctors and on Facebook. And what's interesting in the fourth bullet down there is that I think it's most interesting is we, did a lot of things that might be, kind of hard if you're a patient. We're asking them to do these things. We're pushing off their appointments. We're telling them they can't come. They're making them wait in the car. It sounds like we're being mean to them, but everyone has been really appreciative. Most of our patients are in the higher risk category just in their age. Most people over 40 other people are getting mammograms. And so they really have taken the time to express their appreciation of what I would call Andrew's advanced steps and being real progressive about this. And there is a financial impact, no doubt. We have 4 weeks of shutdown. Now we have less patient volume because we're only having 2 or 3 people in there at a time. We're used to, revenuing a lot more, and we still have all the equipment and most of the staff. We've had to make some adjustments, and that's just part of the adjustment process. And I will say, that can be good and bad. I try to look at the good. Sometimes you can look at an opportunity to adjust staff as maybe getting rid of the people who aren't pulling their weight and that kind of thing. And I'm not saying that's the case here, but in other businesses, I would say it can be seen as an opportunity. So those are some of the things, John, that I've got. And, I was curious. I'm looking at the Q&A bar, and I want to encourage everyone to go ahead and ask questions or comments. Maybe I'm not seeing them, but we'd love to hear from you and interact with you, and that's partly why we're here. So feel free to jump out there and ask questions. We're here to answer. But that's what I was going to say about those on those two slides. And if anyone has questions, I'm welcoming, any question, comment. I'll answer anything. And totally transparent here.
Great, Eric. Hey, question here is, so do you see this adjustment in staff being sort of a longer term thing? Are there some real structural changes you've made that'll probably be permanent?
I think there are some structural things, and actually with this new 2-week shutdown, what we're going to do is focus on, what could we do to really sharpen the saw? And that's a Stephen Covey term, but basically looking at any way we can make our business less contact as a permanent thing, because I think that's the way we have to think, and trying to be reinvent processes, reinvent ways we do things. We already have a lot of it with the online portal, but I know we can do more, and we're going to actually challenge our staff and pay them to do this, to really start thinking about what we can do to further streamline and further cut actions, activities, further cut things out that aren't needed or repetitive, and really try to streamline. So we do see it as an opportunity, and we are fortunate. I'll say we're not like a restaurant. We're not like a business that's really discretionary. People will come back to medical clinics probably before they're going to go to a sporting goods store or something like that. So we have an advantage there. But I think any business that's kind of off right now, you shouldn't be watching Netflix. You should be thinking about how can you redo things to make it better, is what I would say.
Appreciate that, Eric. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Greg,
So
tell us about some good you're doing. And I'm sorry, do you have something else? Okay. Greg,
no, I apologize. If you're going to introduce the next speaker, that's fantastic.
Oh, okay. No, sorry about that mix-up. Greg, tell us about some good you're doing in the world.
Sure. So I founded Young Entrepreneur Institute 15 years ago after being in the business world. And we currently have 11 people on our staff and a budget of about $1 million. Again, focused on K-12 youth entrepreneurship and the entrepreneurial mindset. Not about every kid becoming an entrepreneur, but developing that entrepreneurial mindset. And we work through organizations, schools to do that. And what I wanted to talk a little bit about today was for those interested perhaps in starting a nonprofit. And because of my background and success with my nonprofit, I do get on a regular basis people coming to me and with ideas for starting a nonprofit. And wanted to start by saying that there's a real misconception in the public's mind about nonprofits, because they come in thinking that nonprofits aren't supposed to make a profit. Totally not true. Really, nonprofit doesn't mean no profit. We use the term nonprofit when we really mean they don't pay tax. And from an IRS standpoint, you don't pay tax on the quote unquote profits. However, if a nonprofit doesn't bring in more revenue than it spends, and that's the definition of profit, right? Revenue greater than expenses yields profit. If a nonprofit doesn't bring in more revenue than it spends, it will cease to exist. And if you are looking to create a sustainable nonprofit, then you have to be thinking about, how do I generate revenue and how do I keep my expenses below that? And that's the difference between, some people are thinking about doing one-time events, maybe a soup kitchen, one-time soup kitchen through their church, or something like that, providing something for kids in their neighborhood. I'm talking about if you want to start a sustainable nonprofit, something that will be ongoing. So that is, when people come to me talking about wanting to start a nonprofit, they're very mission focused, very thinking about the services they're going to provide, the ultimate consumer of those services, which is great, but rarely want to talk about how they will pay for delivering those services. It's the difference between a customer and a consumer. You have that situation in the business world. You know, it's the difference between who consumes the Happy Meal at McDonald's and who pays for the Happy Meal. Parent is the customer, the child is the consumer. Nonprofits have the same situation. Typically, the consumer of their services, the beneficiary of their services, are not paying for those services. That's one of the big differences. Very rarely do you have the person benefiting from what you're doing, paying for what you're doing. So there are a number of funding models for nonprofits. And actually, if you Google nonprofit revenue models, there's a great article from Stanford, and it says 10 nonprofit revenue models. That's literally the name of the article. It's a great article, lists 10 different ways, and just to talk about a few of them, there are membership organizations. That's one way of generating revenue. There's the fee for service. The big example here in Northeast Ohio is the Cleveland Clinic. The Cleveland Clinic is in fact a nonprofit. Some people may think it shouldn't be, but it is. And but it charges for its services. That's a fee for service model. There's the broad fundraising approach where you do gala events, or maybe you have a race, charity race or something like that. That's another way. Public funding. So Cuyahoga County Arts and Culture provides funding to the arts community here in nonprofits here in Northeast Ohio. The revenue model for my organization, Young Entrepreneur Institute, is through major grants. Two organizations, one of which is the Britton D. Morgan Foundation, provide at least probably around 80% of our funding comes from two major organizations, and they fund our operations and the work that we do. So we are not a fee for service. We don't do gala fundraising events. We don't have membership, and we don't get any public funding. And the number one reason for failure of a nonprofit is not because there isn't a need. There is a lot of need out there for services to underserved and under-resourced communities. The reason nonprofits fail is they run out of money and they don't focus on their funding model, which is why I'm emphasizing this. There are lots of needs out there, lots of people who could use your services, but unless you think about how you're going to pay for those services, you will not have a sustainable nonprofit. So that's probably the major thing. The other suggestion I would make, if you're really serious about starting a nonprofit, is either volunteer or serve on the board of a nonprofit. Get some experience while you're still working full-time, and see how the inside of a nonprofit works. For a lot of people, before they start a nonprofit, their only experience is very much from the outside. So I serve on two nonprofit boards besides Young Entrepreneur Institute. So I get a pretty broad perspective of what it takes in terms of starting and managing a small nonprofit. If you're thinking about starting a nonprofit, find one that's already serving the community or already doing the types of services that you're thinking of providing. Volunteer for them or offer to serve on their board. Learn about how they do that. Learn about how they provide funding and their business model. And I think you'll have a much more likely be successful in creating a sustainable nonprofit. So those are my primary thoughts about that. I don't know if there is our services available. There's an organization called SVU. Its initials are SVU, and actually off the top of my head, it just escaped me right now what those initials stand for. But it is an organization that helps nonprofits and helps small nonprofits. It's got chapters all over the country, and there is one here in Northeast Ohio. So if you look up SVU, that's a great way to get some support.
Thank you very much, Greg. Hey, question for you. Tell us about what it's like to actually try to go get that first grant.
That is yes, good question. Probably the critical thing is to find mission alignment. In other words, think about what your nonprofit is trying to do, who you're trying to serve, the kind of work that you would be doing, and then look for foundations, government programs, things like that, where their mission is aligned with yours. Because I can tell you, if from foundations, corporate foundations, lots of corporate foundations in Northeast Ohio, almost every major corporation in Northeast Ohio has a related foundation. If there isn't mission alignment, they will not provide any funding. So there's no point in asking the Cleveland Foundation for funding if what you're doing doesn't meet one of their pillars, one of their mission focuses. Also, you can expect that it's about relationships. It really is exactly like the business world. The foundations and corporations are your customers. Sales is about building relationships. So you will not get $1 million the first time you go out and talk to people. You have to build those relationships. You start small, build relationships, and over time, perhaps can get significant funding. But it's not unlike the sales cycle in the business world, where you are building relationships, finding mission alignment, and as opposed to the scatter approach. Some people just start sending out letters to every foundation out there, or just start submitting applications online. That is not a particularly effective approach. It's just like sending out a mass mailing email and expecting to get a lot of response if you're selling a product. You won't get very much response to that. So look for foundations, corporations where there's mission alignment. Again, talk to people who have nonprofits in the space that you're thinking of going to. Where do they get their funding? If you go to their website, oftentimes they will list the people that are funding their organization. Look at that list. If you're going to be doing something like that other nonprofit is doing, those funders for them, there's probably a good chance that you'll have mission alignment between those existing funders for that nonprofit and your idea.
Appreciate that, Greg. Thank you very much. So Doug, tell us about digital transformation of businesses.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, John. You know, when you think of digital transformation, it's not a new concept. I mean, it's been happening for decades now, where technology is advancing and customers are getting more savvy with that technology. But when you think of digital transformation, it's driven really by three factors. The first one is changing the human behavior. You know, if you look back at the advent of the internet, that really led to the change in businesses. So, you know, in the US, it was our increasing access to the web and how our mobile devices that we have, that's leading to the people's behavior that changes and forces those businesses to change. The second thing is the technology, and that is what has made everything possible for digital transformation. And then business models, when those new behaviors kick in and that new technology changes, it needs to lead to new business models. So when you look at business models that were 20 years ago, they're probably significantly different than what they were back then. And with this crisis that's going on, it's brought a dramatic escalation of the human behavior. It's not so much, the way that people have done things. It's just increased that. So now people are ordering more food online and they're going to pick it up, and they're ordering things online and having it shipped to their house instead of going and picking it up. So those behaviors are actually changing. Now, I don't think that digital transformation, I don't think this is going to escalate it anymore. After we get through this, I think it's just kind of changing that. And some examples of that is when we're talking about training and we're talking about onboarding new employees. That's changing because now we're all starting to use Zoom, and we're starting to use like Skype and some of the other platforms that have video conferencing, where you might be doing interviews and we might be training people. There are some companies out there that are actually starting to use QR codes where they can start to incorporate that with their products, and then you can screenshot it, and then you can teach or train the people on how to use your product instead of having to call a customer service line. Shooting a short video that might show somebody how to do that. There's even some advancements in video training where there's actual virtual like plugins. So if you're trying to show somebody how to hook up a VCR to a television, I say a VCR, that tells you how old I am. But when you use a DVD player and you need to plug it into the back of your television, and you're a little bit more elderly and you really don't know how to do that, well, you can hit a QR code, and it takes you to a video lesson. Or it might actually you can hold up your phone and it might show a video of where actually to plug into the back of the DVD, and then where to plug it into your television set. So there are those kind of advancements that are going on with that. So you need to start thinking about those things moving forward, about what your customers are going to be doing. Editing those capabilities for the video and sound. Now we're starting to see micro-learning. If you look on Facebook, companies are now using short micro training video sessions where they're only 15 seconds long, especially for food prep or for food, cooking food and how they manage that. So companies are starting to think about, how can I give quick video, lessons for the people to learn what they need to learn. And then for C, knowledge of the equipment and the software, again, incorporating some kind of QR code or some kind of way for the user to get online to be able to see how to use your equipment, what is best to be used for, those type of things. And then how to promote it. That's always the big question that we always get is, what's the best way for us to promote products that we need to put out there? It really is dependent on your audience of your business. If you have more of an elderly business or an elderly clientele, you might want to think about through Facebook or whatever medium might be out there that is done. So you need to do a little bit of research on what your customers and what they're looking for and how they want to get their information. So there's a lot of things that you need to think about. And like I said, right now we're working with a lot of companies to identify the best way and the best approach for them to not only let their customers know that they understand the pain that they're going through as a customer, but how they're going to help them in the near future and how they get through that. So those are just some things that I can offer. There's one example I wanted to give. There's a company over in Europe who's called Young Foodies, and what they're starting to do is they're launching a new app for when they can offer customers online delivery of their products. So that's spawning from this. That they're being able to do that, and they're going to start increasing their business online, where they'll be able to deliver food and food items to their customers through this app. And then another one, and one that I like to use when I go to Sam's Club, is the Scan and Pay and Go app. Those are becoming big now, and because we talked about no touch systems and processes, that's a big thing too, where we have to train people on how to walk through a store, be able to scan their products, pay for it on their app, and then be able to just walk out the door and not even have to interact with anybody or touch hands or exchange money or anything like that. So those are things that we need to think about when we're moving forward, and that's part of that digital transformation that we're talking about, John.
Appreciate it, Doug. Very, very useful insights. Somebody wants to know what's a QR code?
A QR code is that little square code that you see with a bunch of dots and in it, where you can take your phone now, your iPhones and probably your Samsung phones. When you point your camera at it, it will then ask you if you want to go to that website or if you want to go view that information that's coming up. So that's what a QR code is.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So, Eric, tell us about your personal journey. Tell us about how you haven't had a real paycheck since 2005.
And that's true. Sometimes you have a bad month and it really doesn't happen. Well, I can tell you, for people who are thinking about going out in your own business, it is scary, but I'll say this, I've said this to many, even family members, that there's a lot of advantages and taxes and other things that make it not so daunting. But it does take everything you got, and I'll get to what makes it all work in a minute. But some of the key, I would say, since 2005, I've been on my own, and we've had a company, and we've done virtual training. We've also done, real classroom, in-person training too, and other consulting. But I would say some of the things that have helped me the most is just being flexible with customers. Different customers like to pay different ways, and I honestly need to sit down and think about how COVID affects all this, just the way Doug was talking about how everything is different, and how you need to rethink, what's the best way to have someone, pay me, what's the best way for the transaction to actually happen. But if you focus on how to solve problems to your clients and what's the biggest pain in the butt, that's where you'll find, if you can make it easy for them, they're willing to pay. I was working with my 11-year-old today in a Google Classroom, and it was pretty neat. You could upload pictures as assignments, and that was helpful. And someone had to think of that, and it's very relevant now. But that's solving a problem of not having to go to school and transmit paper, which could possibly infect teachers and et cetera. So those kinds of things are solving problems. As far as personally, journaling, I would say, the second bullet, being responsive, doing things now. When you have an idea, just do it now. Don't push it off. Procrastination, just like having a loaded gun. It's like you're carrying all this stuff around with you, things you have to do. If you just write down what you got to do, maybe even plan your day. I plan my day every morning when I wake up. What am I going to accomplish? What are the things that are most important? Prioritize your goals and objectives. And I like the phrase focus and finish. I've been using that with the 11-year-old too. Let's focus. Let's finish this in the next 5 minutes and be done. And we won't have to occupy our brain with any more of that, thinking about that. Again, discipline is a big deal here. When you work from home or you work virtual, you've got to get up in the morning. You've got to have some kind of routine. I like to use music. If I'm getting tired or mentally exhausted, I'll take a shower, I'll work out, I'll listen to music, and maybe it's music from my college days or whatever. It brings back a memory. It basically cues me to back into a mental state of being productive. I would say right now, I've got 3 other people in the house that weren't here 4 months ago. 2 were at school and 1 was at a clinic. And we have to have house rules on when my college kid is having her webinars that she needs to finish college, and when we can do playtime, loud playtime. And, those are things that are realities now that more people are working from home. But I would say all these things hinge on passion. And I think Greg pointed this too, when you talk about alignment, whatever you're going to do, in your future, you've just got to be passionate about it. You'll never be the best at something unless you are absolutely love it and you're passionate about it. And if you can do that, you'll find joy in helping people, and it won't be work anymore. It'll be really easy. So those are some key things personally, and you can go ahead to the next slide, John, because the remainder of it is, just some tools as far as, how to navigate through these times. I've found, I've used GoToMeeting since 2005, found it very, very helpful. But I would say Zoom is, very easy to use and gives you that more personal feel than just looking at a screen like you all are right now. Zoom and other tools, those are things that are helpful. I would say if you're going to do this professionally, I would dress for success. You image, especially since they're not really seeing your body language, is important. So you want to have that, as best as you can for whatever product you're trying to sell, make it make sense. Social media, LinkedIn, and I would say, I've interviewed Arnold Schwarzenegger one time, and he said, I asked him what his big success, he says, be useful, in that kind of accent, which was fun. Just think about how you can be useful to your audience. You won't be nervous if you're always thinking about what can I do for my audience? How can I help my audience? What can I say or do that will help them? As part of the email routine, I would say I get hundreds of emails every day, and now I used to be passionate about these organizations. Now I just delete them because they've fatigued me. They give me too much crap all the time, every day, and I just delete. So Jay Abraham's a good resource on how to market your business and how to deliver, expert information without overdoing it. I want to make this point too. For me, and it's different for everyone, I don't feel it's needed to do content creation every day. You just don't have enough hours in the day. So focus on what you can do best. What we found in our business, which is basically energy efficiency for buildings, some people would call that boring, but when we write articles that are published in, magazines, we publish those also on our website. And so someone can go to our website, click on articles, and get free webinars, free recordings, free tips and articles, and it's all there. And some people would require your model might require people sign up and you get their email, or there's a variety of marketing tools for that. We just found it, hey, go get it for free. We don't care if you're in our database or not. But there's a lot of different ways you can run that. I would say one thing, and just finally closing out my points here, is that whatever you do with your career now, and however you contribute or want to invest in the world, some of those rewards you might not get right away. I worked on the weekend helping a client, or potential client, I could say, that came out of nowhere from an article I wrote 3 years ago. And so you may just be prepared that some of the rewards won't come, right away. And that's okay. If you're doing good work, if you're passionate about it and you're doing good for the world, you should just continue doing that. It'll work out, especially if you're really good at it. So those are my points, John, and I don't want to run this thing long. I already kind of talked too much already. So if there's not many questions, just, go on. It's okay.
That's fine. Let's move on to Greg. Greg, tell us about starting businesses.
Well, yeah, I'm going to stay focused on nonprofit, but it's really the same advice that I would give if you were starting a business. Which I think competitive advantage is really important. There are whole books about that, but it really boils down to, and when we teach it to kids, it's about being different or better. What are you doing that's different, and why is that difference better? And not just better for anybody, but why is it better for your target customer? Who is that target customer? And like I said, for a nonprofit, that target customer is the foundations and corporations and the people you're fundraising with. So if you are going out to foundations and corporations, one of their key metrics is dollar per impact. For every dollar that they spend, how much impact are you going to have with that? And they do look at that metric. There is so much more demand for their funding than they have available. And so they want their dollars to go as far as possible, just like the average consumer. So for example, how does my organization do that? We focus on, and this comes from my experience in the business world, we're a leverage model. In other words, we don't provide services directly to the kids. We work through schools and organizations. So we train the trainer, we train the teachers, we work with executive directors of nonprofits to help them deliver entrepreneurship education to their kids. And so when we work with hundreds of adults, we're impacting tens of thousands of kids. And so the money that we get from foundations and corporations has a very high impact for every dollar that's spent. We also have a collaborative model. We're also unusual in that we collaborate with anybody. We have the philosophy of no wrong door. There's no wrong way to do entrepreneurship education. Junior Achievement is a great organization. Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship, Girl Scouts, these are all great organizations doing entrepreneurship education. We work and support all of them. That's one of the things that makes my organization different and better than other organizations doing youth entrepreneurship. We work with and support everybody. We take what we call an ecosystem approach. We're trying to build the ecosystem, youth entrepreneurship ecosystem. And we are pretty much the only organization in the country actually that takes that approach. So that makes us dramatically different and better. So if you are going to start a business or a nonprofit, think about how your organization is different. Why are you doing something that nobody else is doing? And why are you doing it better? And by the way, that different and better doesn't mean that nobody else in the world is doing it. That just means in your market. So if that's another way of identifying a good idea for a nonprofit. What's happening in Los Angeles or New York or San Francisco or Chicago? Can you bring that idea to Cleveland, into Northeast Ohio? Those would be proven nonprofit business models. If they're doing it somewhere else and doing it successfully, much easier to replicate, steal, borrow, whatever you want to call it, somebody else's idea that's already been tested, adjusted, proven to work. You just need to bring that into this market. I use that strategy very successfully in my commercial businesses, and it applies in the nonprofit space as well. So those are some of my key ideas, John.
I appreciate it, Greg. In the interest of time, I'm going to move on here. We're getting close to the 3 o'clock hour. Doug, tell us about promotional campaigns using social media and some other digital advertising.
Yeah, I'll be real quick, John. I think, what we need to think about is, especially now through this time, is how is my marketing going to change with my business? And I think if you look at those 3 bullet items, I think they're a little bit out of order because, we talk about people, process, and technology. So, the first one is, do I need to hire somebody who specializes in all that? Well, you might have to, depending on what your business. If you look at the grocery market right now, they're doing a lot of hiring of, online shoppers to walk around the stores and buy stuff for people that are ordering stuff online. And their market might change. People might start to like that, where they don't have to go to the grocery store. They can just order it at work, and then it shows up an hour later at their house, and then they could cook their dinner. So that might change. Then what are some of the venues, depending on your market? Like I said, we talked about audience. It depends on what your audience is. Are there more people using Facebook? And those are some of the analytics type of stuff. When we get to the second one there, letter B, is what are some of the tools that we use? We use Google Analytics. We have Tableau. I like Google Analytics because you can take some courses online to be either a basic analytic person, or you can take an advanced course, all free through Google, and you can start, analyzing your business through Google. How do people search for you? What do they search for? What pages do they visit? Those types of things. So that's going to really drive your marketing and what you're going to be doing from social media from that perspective. So those are also things that we need to think about too, Joe.
Appreciate it, Doug. Thank you very much. So this is our last bit of information for you. So I appreciate you hanging on there. We promised you 3 o'clock, and I think we'll be very close to on time. So I want to introduce you to something called the hierarchy of risk control. It's a classical technique to describe ways of controlling any kind of risk. And usually when I'm showing this diagram, I'm speaking to people about preventing fires and explosions related to boilers and industrial plants. But frankly, it works quite well for COVID-19 and infectious disease control as well. So in this diagram, every block here is a way you can minimize risk. And as we move from the top down, the measures become a little less effective and require more supervision and things to go right. So for example, if we could eliminate the disease, and of course, hopefully someday we will with a vaccine, that's the best of all risk control technologies. I think you'd agree. If we could substitute COVID-19 for the common cold, well, that'd sort of be okay too, but we can't really do that. So the things we can probably practically do in all of our businesses, and again, these would help spark ideas and ways we can differentiate, is we can do engineering controls, which are actual physical things that don't require on human beings to listen to us or do things properly, like UV light disinfection, clear plastic barriers, better filters. We can do administrative controls, which are rules like, hey, we're going to put marks on the floors in supermarkets and tell people to wash their hands a lot. And then last but not least, we can focus on PPE. So I want to kind of take some of these thoughts and walk you through how we would apply them conceptually in the real world. And really, this is all about differentiating your business, like Greg and Eric talked about. So let's pretend there's 2 office buildings, Building A and Building B, and they're in the same part of a downtown, same price per square foot, but Building A wants to be a little different. So maybe Building A is going to do a bunch of engineering controls. I won't read all of these to you, but they're going to make a lot of physical changes, UV light disinfection, more air changes in their air handler. Maybe they're going to have brass or copper doorknobs that are resistant to bacteria growing. Building A is going to have a bunch of administrative controls. People entering the building is going to be screened, like Eric talked about at his wife's practice. Maybe the building is going to be deep cleaned periodically, including workstations, and we're going to be telling people about that. We're going to be documenting that and putting that in advertising literature. And then maybe building a staff is going to not only have PPE, and this is something that applies to everyone today, but maybe they're going to be trained in how to use that PPE. And maybe one little thing you can get out of this presentation is that, I see people running around with masks and gloves, but, when we used to use these going into industrial plants before the virus, we all had to get fit tested. You had to worry about facial hair. There's a 27-minute YouTube 3M training video about donning. It's a proper way to put on a mask, and doffing, taking it off, so you don't contaminate yourself and other people. And likewise, even gloves. You need training on gloves for how to safely put them on and take them off without contaminating yourself. And again, there's great YouTube training videos there. So whatever you do, think about differentiating yourself personally, your building, your business, whatever it is, so that you can communicate how this adds value coming out of this. Let everyone know what you've done to minimize risks. I think you'd all agree, you'd rather be in building A than building B, and it would be worth more to you to be in building A. So to close, I really appreciate the time and effort and insights provided by our panelists. Thank you again, gentlemen. And I want to thank you all for attending. You're all heroes. We're all heading on a journey together. Good luck on your hero journey. And we'll be posting a recording of this webinar to YouTube so you can pass it on to others. This concludes our presentation, and thank you very much again for attending.